Bhagavan ki jai. Jai Thakur Premanande Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 3, Chapter 14, entitled Pregnancy of Deity in the Evening, text 26. Nayasya loke svajanapparova. Nayasya loke svajanapparova. Natyadrito no takaschit vigarhya. Natyadrito no takaschit vigharya. Vayam vratair-yach charanapavidham. Vayam vratair-yach charanapavidham. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogham. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogham. Nayasya loke svajanaparova. Natyadrito no takaschit vigharhya. Vayam vratair-yach charanapavidham. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogam. Nayasya loke svajanaparova. Natyadrito no takaschit vigharhya. Vayam vratair-yach charanapavidham. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogam. Loke vajanaparova. Natadrito no takaschit vigharhya. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogam. Nayasya loke svajanaparova. Natyadrito no takaschit vigharhya. Vayam vratair-yach charanapavidham. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogam. Nayasya loke svajanaparova. Natyadrito no takaschit vigharhya. Vayam vratair-yach charanapavidham. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogam. Nayasya loke svajanaparova. Natyadrito no takaschit vigharhya. Vayam vratair-yach charanapavidham. Asasmahe jambata bhukta bhogam. Na, never. Yasya of whom loke in the world, svajanaha kinsmen, paraha unconnected, va nor, na neither, ati greater, adritaha favorable, na not, uta or, kaschit anyone, vigarhyaha criminal, vayam we, vratahi by vows, yat whose, charana feet, apavidham rejected, ashasmahe respectfully worship, ajam mahaprasad, bata certainly, bhukta bhogam remnants of foodstuff. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation: Lord Shiva regards no one as his relative, yet there is no one who is not connected with him. He does not regard anyone as very favorable or abominable. We respectfully worship the remnants of his foodstuff and we vow to accept what is rejected by him. Purport: Kashyapa informed his wife that just because Lord Shiva happened to be his brother-in-law, that should not encourage her in her offense towards him. Kashyapa warned her that actually Lord Shiva is not connected with anyone, nor is anyone his enemy. Since he is one of the three controllers of the universal affairs, he is equal to everyone. His greatness is incomparable because he is a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is said that among all the devotees of the Personality of Godhead, Lord Shiva is the greatest. Thus the remnants of foodstuff left by him are accepted by other devotees as Mahaprasad, or great spiritual foodstuff. The remnants of foodstuff offered to Lord Krishna are called prasad, but when the same prasad is eaten by a great devotee like Lord Shiva, it is called Mahaprasad. Lord Shiva is so great that he does not care for the material prosperity for which every one of us is so eager. Parvati, who is the powerful material nature personified, is under his full control as his wife. Yet he does not use her even to build a residential house. He prefers to remain without shelter, and his great wife also agrees to live with him humbly. People in general worship Goddess Durga, the wife of Lord Shiva, for material prosperity. But Lord Shiva engages her in his service without material desire. He simply advises his great wife that of all kinds of worship, the worship of Vishnu is the highest, and greater than that is the worship of a great devotee or anything in relation with Vishnu. Translation again: Lord Shiva regards no one as his relative, yet there is no one who is not connected with him. He does not regard anyone as very favorable or abominable. We respectfully worship the remnants of his foodstuff and we vow to accept what is rejected by him. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasme Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Mukham karoti vachalam pangam mangayate girmyat kripatamaham vandeshi gurun tirtharanam deenatharanam paranam namadagam Shri Chaitanyeshwaram. Hare Krishna. So we're continuing the conversation between Kashyapa Muni and his wife Diti. And we're hearing the glories of Lord Shiva. So yesterday Radha Vinod Prabhu talked a lot about the qualities of Lord Shiva and the wonderful paradoxes, apparently contradictions we perceive with Lord Shiva's qualities, such as him possessing all yogic mystic cities but being married to the personification of material energy, and also how he lives under a tree with no particular opulence, but his wife, mentioned here, is powerful material nature personified, is under his full control as his wife, yet he does not use her to even build a residential house. So we see these great qualities of Lord Shiva, and it's further continued here, about how although Kashyapa Muni is considered to be his brother-in-law, because you see, of the many daughters of Daksha, one of the daughters of Daksha happened to be Diti, and her sister, youngest sister, was Sati, and Sati was married to Lord Shiva. So in that sense, Kashyapa happened to be the older brother-in-law of Lord Shiva. But Kashyapa is warning Diti, because we see even in the case of Srila Prabhupada, when a great Vaishnava exists or has appeared in the material world, even their own swajana, their own relatives, their friends, their family, they don't seem to recognize the great exalted nature of such a Vaishnava. So therefore we see in Prabhupada's pastimes, many of Prabhupada's intimate circle of relatives and friends did not see how wonderful or how great a Vaishnava Acharya Srila Prabhupada was. In fact, it's mentioned that, I think this is something even mentioned by, it's mentioned by Christians, I'm not sure if it's mentioned by Jesus, that even a preacher is not even accepted within their hometown. Why? Because of that nature of familiarity breeds contempt. One becomes overly familiar with such a personality. So Kashyapa is warning his wife, although there is such relationship between us and him, one should not become overly familiar in that sense. In other words, you should not, he did not want to encourage her offense against Lord Shiva. So Kashyapa is giving all of these wonderful qualities of Lord Shiva to emphasize to his wife that, hey, wait a second, this is the great qualities of Lord Shiva. He may appear to you just as a brother-in-law married to your younger sister, but these are actually great qualities of Lord Shiva. Now, in Nectar Devotion, it's mentioned the 64 qualities of Krishna, and how qualities 50 to 55, 50 to 55 are great qualities that Lord Shiva possesses. Although Krishna possesses them in full, Lord Shiva possesses. And then when we go from 56 to 60, only Lord Vishnu and Krishna possess. And then 61 to 64, only Krishna possesses. So these qualities mentioned by Rupa Goswami in the Nectar Devotion, it's mentioned that Lord Krishna possesses 5 more, which are sometimes partially manifested in the persons of Lord Brahma or Lord Shiva. These transcendental qualities are as follows: 51 changeless, 52 all cognizant, 53 ever fresh, and 54 Satchidananda, 55 possessing all mystic perfections. So as I was reading this, you can see how all of these are possessed by Lord Shiva and is being described by Kashyapa here to his best of his capability. I'll go through each one of them just very quickly, but I'll focus on a few of them Prabhupada mentions in this purport very carefully. So 50, the Supreme Controller. 51, Changelessness. Here Rupa Goswami says that Krishna does not change his constitutional position even when he appears in this material world. Name karmani limpanti, name karma phales praha. Krishna says to Arjuna, there's no work for me to perform, neither am I affected by the reactions of work. So for Krishna, when he appears in this material world, janma karma chame divyam evam yo veti tatvataha, that if we understand his transcendental appearance and his activities, just by understanding the transcendental nature of such activities of Krishna, one does not have to take birth again in this material world. Why? Because Krishna is of a transcendental nature. Krishna says earlier in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita that he appears in this material world millennium after millennium in his same transcendental form. So Krishna is not affected by material nature. And Sukadeva Goswami Prabhupada emphasizes this a bit more. How is it that, because when you understand or try to hear about Krishna's pastimes, his human-like pastimes appear to be like that of an ordinary human. Of course, it's meant to attract our senses, attract our minds. But Krishna's nature is of a transcendental on the transcendental platform. And Prabhupada gives this example when he's explaining the Rasa Lila. There he's explaining in Krishna book, he's mentioning that many people think that Krishna's pastimes with the gopis are just ordinary activities between male and female, like boyfriend and girlfriend. But actually that is not the characteristic of Krishna's pastimes with his intimate associates, the gopis. Rather, you can understand it this way: the great yogis, such as Sukadeva Goswami, who is the topmost, they gave up this mundane sex pleasure. They gave up all of this material desire, material sense gratification, to attain the position to worship Lord Krishna. And they relish such pastimes. If after giving up such material qualities of sex pleasure and other material sense gratification, if they endeavor to worship Krishna and then take great pleasure in hearing about such pastimes of Krishna, you can understand the nature of Krishna's pastimes. Prabhupada says Sukadeva Goswami is no fool. The great sages are no fools. They give up such mundane lower nature just to be able to enjoy the pastimes of Lord Krishna by hearing them. So this is the nature of Krishna when he appears in the material world. Same thing with Lord Shiva. You see, Lord Shiva is in a tattva of his own. He's neither Jiva tattva, but he's aligned close to Vishnu tattva as well. So you can see that partial, as Prabhupada mentions here, Rupa Goswami is explaining to us, that partial manifestation of this changelessness is manifested by Lord Shiva. And how is it manifested by Lord Shiva? He becomes, or rather he comes as Guna Avatar. That is, he is in charge or maintaining or regulating the mode of ignorance. But it's mentioned by Prabhupada that he's not affected by that mode of ignorance. So therefore he's changeless in that sense. All cognizant, this is the next quality, that any person who can understand the feelings of all persons and incidents in all places at all times is called all cognizant. And it's mentioned here that Krishna, of course, manifests this quality in full. And the example Prabhupada gives is of when the Pandavas were in the forest and they were following their banishment to the forest, that vow of 14 years away from the kingdom. It's mentioned that at one particular point in time, Durvasa had appeared in Hastinapur, and Duryodhana had faithfully and very reverentially worshipped him. And Durvasa being very pleased, mind you, Durvasa is a amsha of Lord Shiva. He's also very easily pleased and displeased. So Durvasa, giving a benediction to Duryodhana said, we know the story. He sent them to the forest where the Pandavas were. He knew that Draupadi had this very special plate given by Surya Dev, the sun god, that it's called the Akshaya Patra, that when, as long as Draupadi hasn't eaten, that plate will continuously give food. So in that way, the Pandavas were able to satisfy all the sages and residents in the forest wherever they went, and all of the Brahmanas that followed them as they went throughout the different forests. So it's mentioned that Duryodhana knew at that particular point in time Draupadi had eaten. So he knew if I send Durvasa there, he'll further cause more unfortunate circumstances for the Pandavas. So he sends Durvasa there, and when Durvasa comes, then he tells Yudhishthira Maharaj that we have appeared. Yudhishthira Maharaj receives him and he says, we have come, we'll go take our bath, and then we'll come and honor prasadam at your place. And Yudhishthira immediately runs to Draupadi and finds out that Draupadi has already eaten. And so in that situation, Krishna immediately appears. Draupadi feeling that feeling of helplessness, Krishna appears in that situation. That's the example given here. And we know Krishna, it's mentioned here that Prabhupada, there were remnants of food. Prabhupada says Draupadi offered Krishna a container in which there was only a little fragment of some vegetable preparation. Krishna at once ate it. It's mentioned that Krishna is like the root of a tree. If you want to satisfy the leaves and branches, you simply water the root of the tree. Similarly, by serving Krishna, we satisfy everyone else. So therefore, Prabhupada says here, at that moment, all the sages accompanying Durvasa were taking bath in the river, and when Krishna felt satisfaction from eating Draupadi's offering, they also felt satisfaction. So this is the example Rupa Goswami gives of Krishna's all cognitions. And it's amazing how Rupa Goswami is giving that in relation to how Krishna always protects his devotee. So in the same way, Lord Shiva partially manifests this quality. It's mentioned that Durga Devi also is able to understand what's in the heart, and Yamaraj also. They are given that ability by the Supreme Personality Godhead. The next one is ever fresh. Krishna is always remembered, and his name is always chanted by millions of devotees, but the devotees never become satiated. Instead of becoming disinterested in thinking of Krishna and chanting his holy name, the devotees get newer and newer impetus to continue the process. So we can see that partial representation in Lord Shiva as well, and his following and his devotees. They also follow this similar quality or the partial manifestation of ever freshness. But we see that ever freshness is in relation to Shiva worshipping Sankarshan. Okay? So there's that connection there. Quality number 54 is Satchit Ananda Vigraha. That is self-explanatory. We are Satchitananda Vigraha, Krishna is Satchitananda Vigraha, Lord Shiva is also Satchitananda Vigraha. 55, possessing all mystic perfections. That Radha Vinod Prabhu already slightly touched upon yesterday. How our Lord Shiva is known as the greatest amongst yogis. Although Krishna is known as Yogeshwara, that he is the Yogeshwara Ishvara, he is the controller of the master of mystic perfections. And Lord Shiva is known as Yogeshwara. But we see here that Kashyapa is explaining to Diti, these are the qualities of Lord Shiva. That although he is our brother-in-law, he is not affected. He is not connected to us in that way. It appears to be that way, but we must understand very carefully that actually Lord Shiva is a great devotee of the Supreme Personality Godhead. Even Srimad Bhagavatam mentions that of all rivers, Ganga is the greatest, and of all devotees of the Lord, the greatest is Lord Shiva. So we must be very careful, and therefore Kashyapa Muni is saying that we accept the remnants of Lord Shiva. There's a nice pastime actually in Vrindavan, that one time when Krishna, as a small child, he was being nursed by Mother Yashoda, and Lord Shiva, seeing the pastimes of Krishna as Bal Gopal, he wanted to be part of that pastime. He wanted to interact with Krishna in such a pastime. So therefore he appeared in Braja, and he appeared in the land or the house of Nanda Maharaj, and he knocked on the door. And at that time, one of the gopis, elderly gopis, had appeared in front of the door. And when they saw Lord Shiva in his form as a mendicant, completely covered in ashes with snakes around his body and skulls around his neck, then immediately the elderly gopi ran to Mother Yashoda to tell her what's happening. And it's mentioned that when the elderly gopi met Yashodamai, that Yashodamai came to the front and asked, because they were scared, if something appears like this, what will happen to their child? It's an inauspicious omen to see such a thing, according to general parlance, or general understanding or culture. So Yashoda Mai wanted to, remove the mendicant from the fierce-looking mendicant from the vicinity, so that her child would not be affected, would not be hurt. So then Yashoda Mai appears before Lord Shiva, and Lord Shiva says, I want the prasad of your child. I want the prasad of Lord Krishna. And Yashoda Mai said that, you go away from here. We don't have such things. You go away. We don't want to entertain such persons. And so Lord Shiva leaves. And Lord Shiva leaves and he stays residing in the forest nearby Nanda Maharaj's house. And he starts to lament that I cannot get the mercy of the Lord. That although he has appeared, I am still so unfortunate that I have not been able to get the prasad of the Lord. And so Lord Shiva sits in the forest and he meditates on the Lord, chanting his glories. And at that time, Krishna knew what was happening. Of course, he's all cognizant. And he begins crying. And he cries and he cries and he cries. And Yashoda Mai and all the elderly gopis tried so hard to stop, but they could not stop him crying. So then one of the elderly gopis asked Yashoda Mai, did something happen? Like he suddenly started crying. Did something happen before? And she thought, and she said, yeah, one very fierce-looking mendicant came asking for prasad of my son. I don't even understand. He's a yogi. Why does he want prasad of my son? And he looks so bad, he looks so fierce that he could even, cause some bad omens for my son's well-being. So therefore I sent him away. And yeah, it seems at that point in time that Krishna started crying. So then immediately the gopi said, you immediately go and find him and bring him back. And so they went and found him, Lord Shiva, and they brought him back and gave Krishna, rather the other way around, gave Lord Shiva Krishna's darshan. And as soon as baby Krishna saw Lord Shiva, he immediately stopped crying and he started laughing. He started smiling. And seeing that, Mother Yashoda, seeing that how Lord Shiva had given such satisfaction to Krishna, she said that, you live in the forest wherever you are, I'll personally come every day and I'll give the remnants of the foodstuffs of my son. So you please continue blessing my child so that he will never cry again. So in that way, it's mentioned that Gopeshwar Mahadev, I think. It's mentioned that whenever the prasad of the Lord comes, it's offered to him, and then all the devotees in Braja take his remnants. So you can see here, even Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami takes it one step further. He says in Chaitanya Charitamrita that the food offered to Lord Krishna and taken by him is prasad or mahaprasad. And that which is taken by the devotees is known as mahaprasad or mahaprasad. And there are three things that devotees take to heart as the most greatest of prasadam, the greatest benedictions. It's given by Krishnadas Kaviraj in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Does anyone know what these three things are? There are three things. 18 Mahabal. These are very great mercy, great benedictions that one can receive. Yeah. Yeah, the Mahaprasad or the remnants of the devotees, the dust of the devotees, and the water that's washed the feet of the devotees. Bhakta Pada Duli, Bhakta Pada Jal, Bhakta Bhukta Avashishta, 18 Mahabal. And the context in which Krishnadas Goswami mentions these three things is that one day, his name is Kala Krishnadas? Kala Krishnadas. When Mahaprabhu always enters into Jagannath, the temple, Lord Jagannath's temple, there he would walk upstairs first. But before he walks up the stairs, Govinda would wash his feet. And there'd be a little ditch in which Mahaprabhu would wash his feet. And it's mentioned that no living entity within the three worlds was able to even touch the water that had washed Mahaprabhu's lotus feet, because Mahaprabhu had forbade it. He did not allow anyone. So not even a single living entity could touch that water. But this Kala Krishna Das, he had such great faith in the devotees and the Mahaprasada devotees that it's mentioned by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami that Kala Krishna Das would regularly go in Bengal. He would go to house of Vaishnavas and give them mangoes. And it's mentioned that when they would eat, because he could not directly go and ask them for the remnants, they would be very humble and say, you cannot give remnants to such a great Vaishnava like you. So then he would, he made his own method. He contrived a means by which he could take Mahaprasad. And the system then was that outside the home there'd be a small little ditch or a hole where all the rubbish, the refuse of cooking and the leftover prasad would be thrown in and then covered. Natural compost system. But here, Kala Krishnadas, he would then go and offer mangoes to the Vaishnavas. They would honor it, and then they would throw the remnants, which is the seed and the skin, into that pile. And Kala Krishnadas, having so much conviction in Mahaprasad, would immediately go to that position at night when it's completely dark. No one could see what's happening, and he would go and honor the prasad. And Mahaprabhu knew this. And Mahaprabhu, seeing, of course, the mood of Kala Krishnadas, and of course, Krishnadas Goswami gives the specific example of Jadu Thakur and Kala Krishnadas, how Jadu Thakur seemingly appeared to be of a lower caste, and how Kala Krishnadas appeared to be of a higher caste, but Kala Krishnadas did not see that distinction and understood that a Vaishnava is transcendental to such considerations. So then at one particular time, Kala Krishna Das had visited Mahaprabhu in Puri. And having seen Mahaprabhu's feet being washed, he immediately ran to that place and he cupped his hand. And immediately, when Govinda was pouring water on Mahaprabhu's lotus feet, the remnants or the Charnamrit of Mahaprabhu was immediately drunk by Kala Krishna Das. And all the Vaishnavas there were shocked because Mahaprabhu never gave this mercy to anyone. And then again, Kala Krishna Das went again for a second and he drank. And then again, he went for a third and he drank. And when he went again, Mahaprabhu forbade him and said, that is enough, you've taken enough. Just to honor that simple faith that he had in Mahaprasad of the devotees, the strength or the conviction that simply by taking the remnants of the devotees, he will attain perfection in life. That Krishnadas Goswami mentions these three things. That the three most powerful things from a Vaishnava are Bhakta Padaduli, that's the dust from the feet of a Vaishnava, Bhakta Padaduli, Bhakta Padajal, the water that's washed the lotus feet of a Vaishnava, Bhakta Bhukta Avishishta, the remnants of the Vaishnava. So these three things are very important. And one of these things is being mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in the purport. The remnants of foodstuff left by him, Lord Shiva, are accepted by other devotees as Mahaprasad or great spiritual foodstuff. So this is the position of Lord Shiva, that this is how we as Vaishnavas worship Lord Shiva, that he is the greatest Vaishnava. Vaishnavanam yata shambhu. And we take his prasad. Of course, whatever is offered to him, we take as remnants, as Mahaprasad Prabhupada says here. And by doing that, we make great spiritual advancement. Now, continuing on with the purport, Prabhupada then talks about the quality of Krishna, of Lord Shiva as being Satchit Ananda, or completely full of knowledge, eternal and full of bliss, transcendentally. So much so that Lord Shiva, he lives under a tree. And he's surrounded by the greatest of all mystics. These mystics, they can immediately, like you see later on in this canto, Kardama Muni, the husband of Devahuti and the father of Lord Kapiladev himself, being satisfied with Devahuti's service, you can see how wonderful things he was able to manifest by his yogic siddhis. And these are the caliber of the sages and yogis that always attend to the lotus feet of Lord Shiva. But Lord Shiva himself is not affected by such material qualities, such material opulences. You see, I'm coming back to that point of great faith in the devotees. Lord Shiva has such great faith in Lord Shankarshan. It's mentioned in Vavasayatmika Buddhi, verse in Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says, one with proper knowledge, he will have full faith that by Krishna consciousness, I'll attain full perfection. That is Vavasayatmika intelligence. That simply by Krishna consciousness, I'll become perfect. So here Lord Shiva exemplifies that. Because you see here Lord Shiva, he does not care a fig for all material opulences. His goal is simply worship of Lord Shankarshan's lotus feet. That's it. That's all he's caring for. And by that, he is benefiting all living entities as well, especially the unfortunate living entities. Those living entities, you cannot take shelter of any other person other than Lord Shiva, such as the ghosts, hobgoblins, so on and so forth. Those persons are getting such great material benefit by being in the association of Lord Shiva. It's slightly unrelated, but you can see the value of how, by rendering service to a devotee, how one is able to make great advancement in Krishna consciousness. I think it's 1973-74, here in Australia, in Melbourne, one devotee by the name of Sabhapati, he decided after getting, him and Charu Prabhu, both Prabhus getting enthusiastic and encouraged by the devotees in America running for parliament, running for Congress, running a political party. They started the same thing here in Melbourne. And it's mentioned that Sabhapati, he called it the In God We Trust party, and the devotees would regularly canvass by doing Harinam in the main areas of his electorate. They would do Harinam, they distribute prasad, and at the end of the Harinam, he would stand and he would start, reciting or making his pitch. And it's mentioned that it was met with great, obviously on the street, people showed great, not respect, but what's the word? Favorable response. It was met with a great favorable response by the public. So then, when it came time for election, it's mentioned that only 1% of the whole electorate actually voted for him. But he was enthusiastic, he was ecstatic because he'd somehow or other done the service for Prabhupada. So what would we think? What's the point? 1% of all those people in that electorate voted for him? Like, come on. It's mentioned that something like 183 were absent votes, 83 were like postal votes, and the rest were all actual proper on-the-spot ballot votes. So it wasn't much according to our understanding. But there when they had sent in the enthusiastic letter to Prabhupada, Prabhupada said that this is very good. Because that 1% of population that had voted for Sabhapati Prabhu had voted for Krishna. And that was the beginning of their devotional service. So you see the vision we have that is covered by material nature and the vision of a pure devotee. It's completely opposite, completely different. Like that verse in Bhagavad Gita gives, that the daytime for the enlightened sage is the nighttime for the materialist, and vice versa. So you see here, Prabhupada's, and this is what Krishna is saying, that 1% of people that was engaged by my devotee voted for my devotee. And that's a vote for me. And that is devotional service. Right? In the same way, I'm linking parallel here, a small amount of service rendered by the hobgoblins, the pisachas, the ghosts, all of these ferocious and unfortunate living entities that had committed suicide spiritually and materially, they're given such valuable agyata sukriti by serving Lord Shiva. This is Lord Shiva's glories. Because Lord Shiva is even engaging such beings in his service to Lord Sankarshan. So you can understand, see, by being with such a great personality as Lord Shiva, everyone benefits, regardless of what background you're from, regardless of how you approach Lord Shiva. You may approach Lord Shiva for material opulence like Banasur. But you see that Lord Shiva was so compassionate upon Banasur that he even went to Lord Krishna and said, "You please spare him. I've already given him benedictions. Please spare him. He's my great devotee." And Lord Shiva spares him with couple of arms. Keep your pride down. And he also chastised Lord Shiva that why did you give him such benedictions? Anyway, the point here is that Lord Shiva, being in contact with him, everyone benefits. It may seem the demons are getting benedictions from him and they are trying to enjoy material nature. But you see, every single devotee that got benedictions from Lord Shiva was vanquished in the end. But they somehow or other got the association of Lord Shiva. Now, the next part, or the final part of the purport, and I'll end with this point, is that Lord Shiva remained in a humble residence without any shelter, and his wife Durga Devi also